anyone ever heard of the DTC? No. Okay. Their parent company, the DTCC, is where your birth certificate goes. They have over, I think it's over $2 trillion in assets. They're probably the wealthiest company in the world, but you never heard of them. They're called the Depository Trust Company. Okay? And they basically handle all the actual security assets for this country and Canada for sure, maybe for the UK and other countries as well. Okay, so all the actual assets, like the actual paper securities, like birth certificates and stuff, get held by this company. Okay, now their assets, remember how we had the double bookkeeping entries? And on the left-hand side you had assets, and on the right-hand side you had liabilities, right? Their asset, the liability that's created by that asset becomes an asset in the Federal Reserve. Okay? And the Federal Reserve basically works with all the banks, right? Okay? So, let's come down here. And the grantors of the public trust would be the banks through the Federal Reserve. I mean, really, all banks, U.S. corporations, are all part of the U.S. corporation, and thus part of the Federal Reserve. Or actually, the Federal Reserve would be considered one of, like, these entities, kind of outside the box, kind of like the Treasury and the DTC. And interesting, the DTC is called the Depository Trust Company because it operates on both the private and the public side. It's not called the Depository Trust Corporation because it operates on both sides. Okay? So the grantor down here of the public trust will say is the banks. But where does the banks get all its commercial energy? From this trust up here, right? How is money created? We went over this last week. We sign it into we create it. We authorize the creation of money, right? And as such, they take that authorization and work with the Federal Reserve to create the public trust. Okay? The trustees of the public trust, government officials, agents of the government, judges, attorneys, folks like that. So I'll just put
IRS in there?
IRS is kind of a funny agency because they're working for the creditors. IRS, you know, where would the IRS fit on here? Well, they're agents of these guys up here because the reason why the Secretary of the Treasury, the Attorney General, and the Secretary of State all expatriate is because they got to be able to work for the creditors. Okay? So if they're working for the creditors and the IRS is working for the creditors, isn't really the IRS just probably underneath the Secretary of the Treasury in some way, shape, or form? So I would say they probably exist up here, but they also kind of exist down here because they're in charge of the accounting. Okay? Because down here is where all the debt exists. Okay? Up here is where the assets are. Okay? That's why everything up here is not a corporation, is not a U.S. entity, is not in jurisdiction B. Okay? Because all we deal with up here are assets. The public is bankrupt since 1933, and it can't deal in assets. It can only deal in liabilities. Okay? Yes. And who would be the beneficiary of the public trust? The people. Yep. The people. So all these corporations and banks and all these things were set up for you, for your benefit.